Good morning. Welcome to TEAS in Montreal. I'm Lou Berger. This is Yvonne Biram, chairs. We also have Matt Hartley here, our secretary, who usually is remote, so we appreciate him being in the room. For those who are willing, please join him and a few of us on Etherpad and help out with the joint minute taking. And even if you just fix a comment or capture one comment that's said at the mic, that would be awesome. We don't have to capture everything that's said, but only really the gist of any conversation that happens, as well as if you speak at the mic, it's really good to go in and make sure that your name is accurately reflected in the notes. And that's the URLs right here on the bottom. The tools.ietf.org, working group TEAS minutes, and you'll see that you can, from there, you can open up the Etherpad 102. We're midweek, so everyone should be familiar now with how we operate. If you're not, please take a look at the note well. Obviously, this is going to go by pretty quickly, so there's a URL on the bottom about note well, and I'm sure if you Google IETF note well, you'll find this message, and it's basically anything that you say here in session becomes part of our record, and that's obviously true for the mail list as well. We're streaming. We have our video and audio. Please use the microphones. State your name when you come to the mic, and I've already talked about helping us out with Etherpad. I'm on Jabber. There are a few people remote. If anyone else wants to jump on Jabber, that's always helpful. And for those of you who are remote, please feel free to join the Meet Echo queue when it comes time to talk, or talk via Jabber. That's completely up to you. So we've had, since the last meeting, we've had 3 RFCs come out. That's always nice to see. We have a number of documents in the editor queue. It's a good number. I'm not sure there's anything interesting to really talk about there. I think most of these are in ref wait or some minor things. We had one document delayed a little bit with some confusion over IANA, but that's all sorted. We have a document that's in an unusual state, at least for us. This AD watch list on hold with the requirements. There was some discussion about that. I think everyone should have seen the message from Deborah where she'd like us to wait and see how the other documents develop and then decide what we want to do with it. So if that means taking text from here and putting in other documents, great. If that means revisiting publication of this document at a later date, that's great. But that's a little bit of an unusual state for us, but I think we know what we should be doing here. If any of the authors or the AD want to say anything on this, now's a good time, or we can keep going, your call.
It's Deborah. It's a little bit different, I'd phrase it, because what happened was the framework, I think, as often happens, surpassed the requirements. It included much more detail than with the requirements. So what we had said with the authors and on the list was that, do you still feel a need to publish the requirements? And so the on hold state is just a way of the process to let the document expire in a natural way, because there is no other way. So that was it, that the framework, which was already on its way, surpassed the requirements. And I think unless there's some new need came up, we can let that document die.
Okay. So if you think there's important text there, feel free to lift it and put it in other documents, but not publish it as a standalone document is what I'm hearing. We have one document whose publication has been recently requested, and we also have a new errata. There's a typo in there that no one caught, even though we have a lot of reviews. Some of us are a little dyslexic, including myself, so sometimes that happens, although I can't claim this one. We have no documents in working group last call, but we do have a few new documents, some of which are on the agenda. Actually, I think all of them are on the agenda. So we'll be hearing more about these later. For those of you who really want an eye chart, here's our agenda. There are no changes from what has been posted other than a correction and a draft name. That's the only thing that's changed recently in this agenda. We did receive a incoming liaison. This actually came in before the last meeting. There is a response requested. In the past, CCAMP has led responses to SG15. I'm not sure if we need to send a response here, even though one was indicated as being requested. So if you think that this is an important thing to respond to, please send a message to this list or send a message to CCAMP and we'll work it out. But right now, we're not planning on taking any action on it in this group. Just as a reminder, we do have an IPR process where before accepting a document or moving it into last call that we note, we ask all contributors and authors to note whether they're aware of any IPR or not aware of any IPR. We just want an explicit statement. And just as a reminder of our process, if you contribute to the work of the working group in any way, and the work of a particular document in any way, if you're aware of IPR, you're required to disclose it. And that's even as much as making a comment at the mic. Please do use the mail list as much as possible. It really is helpful. Furthermore, it's the way we gauge we gauge consensus in our process. And with that, I think we're done with that high-level overview.
Morning. Before we get to the working group document status, we wanted to point your attention to some work that we are planning to do in TEAS. There have been a few requests in recent times for a document that talks about IP/MPLS traffic engineering architecture landscape within IETF. Basically, the ask is for something that can define T normatively. We usually, in the past, we have pointed to RFC 3272, which is the T principles document. This is about 16 years old. In recent times, we also used Adrian's RFC 7926, that's the T interconnected T networks document as a useful reference, but there still seem to be some gaps, some holes that need to be plugged in. Lou and I have been chatting. We are still looking at how to go about getting this work done. If anybody is interested in contributing or discussing more, see us offline and we can take it from there. Next up is working group document status. Of the 24 working group documents that we have, there are 8 that are in various stages of ISG processing. We have 11 documents today on the agenda. That's a good number. So that leaves us with these 5, and I'll walk through the status of each of those in the next few slides. First up is the ACT and Yang document. There haven't been any changes to this since early this month. The authors have promised to publish an update fairly soon. In the meantime, if there are any questions or concerns with regards to the model, please do reach out to the others. Do that on the list so that everybody can be appraised of. The next is the PCCC use cases document. There hasn't been any change to this since April of last year. There was an update in July. The authors did say that they wanted to work on an additional use case. Is Dhruv walking up to give a brief update, I guess?
Hi, this is Dhruv from Huawei. I'm not the author, but I discussed with all the other co-authors, and they have asked me to take up the editor role so that we can move this document forward. So I'll do that pretty soon after this, I think.
Thank you. Next is, okay.
This is Adrian. I'm a little disappointed with that because the use cases was a support to getting 8283 published. I think I got the number right, which it is now. And I know that the IESG, hello Deborah, doesn't really see much value in use case RFCs. Why do we want to move this forward now?
What are you disappointed about?
The authors said to Drew, could you help us move it forward?
You would prefer just to see it die?
Well, be an archival record of the use cases that prompted the work, and now let's get on with the solutions.
So typically, we have a lot of different ways of doing archival records. Certainly drafts are there, but if we want an archival record that's more permanent, we usually do RFCs. If they want to do the complete this work and move it through the process, and the working group doesn't feel it objectionable, why would we stop that?
So if it's a working group document, you've got to be a step further than that, haven't you? The working group actually has to want to move it forward, not
That's
just...
right.
Yeah.
And we accepted this as a working group document, so we previously pulled it. So the next step would be to finalize the work and then go take it to working group last call. And if there's not support to take it through at that point, the working group can decide to kill it at that point, or we can decide that there's support to move it forward.
Yeah, okay, I was just trying to save Drew some work.
Okay. One of the things that I think is important to note, and I'm happy for this to go back to the IESG, is that we often talk about that we don't have enough participation of actual users. And one of the ways the users contribute to our process is by writing the use case. And I don't see a reason why we should devalue that work relative to the solutions that they drive us towards. So I see it just as valuable and in some ways more valuable. So I don't see a reason to block it at this stage. Now, certainly, I'm just one member of the working group, and if the working group disagrees, it won't pass last call.
Deborah, as Adrian says, there are quite a few ISG members that push back. They push back pretty strong. And so I would just say, just make sure the document is strong. Make sure that there's strong support from the working group and the chairs. And I will do my best to take it through. And because I do see also that the use case documents, if they are strong use case documents and not just something very weak, have a lot of value. But we got to make sure, because of the ISG, what they will push back is to say, especially, if the work is already underway, the protocol work, they're going to say, well, this stuff gets outdated. Why are we publishing it? Just put it on a wiki. So make sure the document is a strong document so we can get it through. And make sure, maybe make sure you have some, I forget who's the authors on this, make sure you have some operators on it or something, and really show this is not something that's going to expire like in 5 years, that it's a useless document.
Dhruv from Huawei. Thanks for all the inputs. I'll take it up with the authors. But I think the immediate aim was just to make sure that all the text is correct and updated. And there were some more requests for a few more use cases. So my immediate goal is just to keep the document up to date. And then we can again start a thread whether what's the next step? Should we publish it or should we not? I think we are still okay. We're open to that. But my aim is to make the document up to date and correct first.
Yeah, let's mature it, get it to the point where we think it's done, do the last call process, and that last call process is the time to have the discussion if we would decide to either move it forward or to not move it forward.
Igor Briskin, Huawei. I agree with Adrian, actually. I think that use case document is basically helps to understand requirements, and requirements help to set up frameworks. And by the time we have solution, basically, I don't see much help in use case except for education purposes or something like that. And in many cases, we have more use cases, and something has changed from the original stuff. So So basically, it is just like a milestone, in my opinion. It shouldn't be like an eventual document, something that is published. It just helps.
Okay. Bring your thoughts when we go to the working group last call. Thanks. Next is the Telemetry recording document. There was one revision published for this, minor editorial changes. There are, however, a fair number of outstanding comments that need to be addressed. The authors did talk to us offline. They have promised that they would address these in the coming weeks. So we'll keep an eye out for that. We have the two RSVP Young model documents next. The base RSVP model that's discussed in the Young RSVP document, that's ready for last call. And the RSVP-T document, it needs another round of internal review before the authors can claim that it's ready for working on last call.
Yeah, if you think these documents are important to you, now would be a good time to read it. Yeah, it's going to change, so be willing to put in the time to do a review now and when it comes to last call. But there's an important gate of going to the Yang doctor review, which will make sure that from a Yang perspective, it's all right. But from a functionality standpoint, the authors think this is really close. So if you're planning to use this, now's a good time to look at it and comment on it.
Deborah, I just was thinking back on the ISG statement. One aspect of not publishing use cases requirement documents was that people saw it as delaying protocol solution work. And if the protocol solution is already published and this is still coming through, as long as it's aligned, that's fine. But I think one thing from the ISG statement, what I saw as the most important line is, don't let it delay solution work. We've seen a lot of groups, they sit on these documents forever and don't even begin the solution work. I think we all know there's one case in one of our own routing area working groups where that happened. And that, I think the ISG looks more favorable at it if they see solution work is already in progress and that these are just not blocking documents.
Thank you.
So that's all we have in this deck. Next up is an update on the T tunnels and T interfaces models. Tarek could be providing that when he's done talking. So.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay in the back? Yeah. My name is Tarek, and I'm giving a quick update today on this document. This document covers the configuration management modeling aspects of TE tunnels, LSPs, and interfaces. Do you have a pointer? Thank you so much. So this work started a couple of years ago, and the team, the co-authors, have been active in refining the model. By now, we think we've covered most of the standardized TE features. In terms of the changes we made to the last revision since last IETF meeting, we did add references to to the data nodes, the model data nodes, more RFC references. We had a couple of other updates to add new features, new TE features to the model. I'll go over those in details in the subsequent slides. So the first update to the model was to incorporate the association between LSPs. This is done in IETF by using an association object. We've added support for identifying those different association types as identities, and this makes it extensible to model new association types that our IETF will define in the future. After defining the types that are standardized already, we used it in the model. We have a way to associate LSPs. we've created two lists of association objects. One is a base association object, and one is an extended association object. The base has a type ID source and a global source as defined in RFC, and the extended has an additional extended ID. We've identified a couple of use cases for using those. An example I'm putting up here is to associate LSPs for resources, primary and standby, association, and computing diverse LSPs that originate from different ingresses. I'm sorry if the font is not clear, but I tried to make it legible. But the next update was the explicit route list that we've defined. We combined the numbered, unnumbered entry, and we made it extensible to cover the case where the entry is a node ID or a link ID. And in the numbered case, it can be a numbered node ID or a numbered link ID. In the unnumbered case, it can be a combination of a node ID and a link ID. So we made it more generic to cover all the cases. Next, we added in the exclude route object, we added the capability to exclude SRLGs as well. This is usual in the multiple vendors allow having SRLG as an additional constraint in the route object, in the exclude route object. So we added that and remodeled it. So these were the updates or additional features that we've covered in the latest revision. We wanted to raise one point about the model. We have a module which is encompassing all the types, traffic engineering types, and other models that are in different drafts have a dependency on this module. They import it and use groupings from it. And there is specifically one document that is being blocked because this draft, which includes this module, is still not advanced to that state. So we thought that the T types can be split and in a standalone document on its own and progressed so that we can unblock the other draft. This is common in other working group as well, where they define the types as a standalone document. This is what the authors are thinking. It's the best way to progress. So we'd like your feedback if you agree on this. We would like to proceed with this split. We will put the T types in a standalone document. And we think it's ready for Young Doctor review and the working group last call. Once the split happens, it will be ready for that review. And
I actually have a RFC editor process question for Deborah. If we just extract the types module into a new document with a new name, can we change the name of a document that's in ref wait? Because it's really just waiting for that piece. Because if we can, it becomes really easy just to extract that into a new document, wrap it up, and push it out. If we can't, then we have to preserve the name, the file name, as a reference, and it becomes a little the split that's shown here is a little artificial because of that. Okay, so the AD has said, let's talk to the RFC editor on that. I mean, breaking out types into its own document seems to be like a no-brainer, and how we break it out seems to be more about mechanical. Now, if you wanted to break into, I don't remember if it's 2 or 3 documents that you're proposing.
Oh, the next slide will show in more details what we're proposing. So,
right, thanks.
The draft as it stands now, it covers the green, yellow, and red modules. What we're proposing is to take the red module and put it on its own in a document. And this is what is blocking other drafts from progressing right now. The green modules will still advance in the defined document. But as Lou, I think, is mentioning, we have to connect these documents so that we have the history, how it progressed. That's possibly this
Yeah,
is
I'm
what
not
you
sure the
said.
history is so important because you can do
Linkage.
we can do linkages, like we can do replace by, but we can do some interesting linkages, but it's more of the document that's in the RFC editor queue. Since it's in the ref wait state, it's referencing a particular, basically file name, right, draft name.
Oh.
And what I think this is proposing is a new name.
Oh, I see.
And I'm not sure that that'll automatically resolve the issue.
Okay. Okay. I understand now.
This seems to me to be, personally, it seems like the right answer. It's just how we make the mechanics work.
Okay. All right.
But certainly other people should comment too, if, either way, if they disagree.
So in terms of next steps, Loa's there. Okay.
So just for the record, I think this is okay. The thing is that, is it a Yang thing on the naming, or is it the data tracker naming that is the problem?
Data tracker.
The data tracker, you can actually do the replacement all over, different name, doesn't matter, it works.
So we have at least two issues here. The data tracker issue is the data tracker replaced by says the document is fully replaced by something and doesn't continue to live.
No, that's not true. You can actually do, if you rename the other one also, you can do a replaced from that one top to the two new, it works.
Yeah, but that one and the top one and the far left one continue the same name. So then you would end up with a replaced by
So
a
it's the
living
same
document.
name there, is it necessary? If you rename it, then you can actually do the replace.
Let's get the tooling to do the right thing as
Okay.
opposed to be driven by the
Yeah,
tooling.
fine.
So that's the data tracker issue. The other issue is there's a document in ref wait, in the RFC editor queue in ref wait,
Okay.
and it's blocked on this red one. And if this red one comes with a new name, is the RFC editor okay with us changing the name of the reference? And that's not normally done in that state. And Deborah's advice is let's go ask the editor. And again, in this case, we may make.
I think we've done that before.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
That's good information. Thank you.
Good. There's light at the end of the tunnel. Okay. In terms of next steps, we think once the split is done, the drafts will be ready for Yang Doctor's review and working group last call. The last draft here will require one more round of review and to be ready for further reviews from the Yang Doctors and asking the working group for last call. That was it. Any questions? Welcome.
Dhruv from Huawei.
Hi, Dhruv.
I had a question regarding the association. Can you just go back to that one? Yeah, thanks. So first question I had was with respect to the association types which are currently defined.
Yep.
I think you are limiting to the one which are defined in RSVP-TE, and we have bunch of association types also
PCE.
described in PCE. So do you guys have a plan to include that or keep it? I would prefer that they are listed at one place.
This is a
rather
good
than-
point. Thank you for raising it. There are additional association objects that are in drafts at the moment. They're not even RCs, and we did not define those yet. We can define them, so we were not sure. But for the PCE ones that are in RFCs, I think it's fair comment. It's the same association type, right? You're extending the association object, the one defined in RSVP. So we will look into that. The other way to do this is another module can extend this identity and add additional types, and that's always open. So we are defining the base TE model, which is extensible.
Got it. Thank you. And also, I could not really understand what was the need to define two different objects. I understand that in our implementation of RSVP, we have two different objects, but in the Yang model, is it really needed to differentiate it so much? Can't we just make extended ID and global source optional and keep a single object?
So we've defined two lists, and we had to define a unique identity for each object. And the way it is for the extended is the extended ID is part of the unique ID. And we couldn't put it in the base because, base object, I meant. So we had to split it, but we can talk offline if you want, if you have a better way of doing it.
Yeah, I think there's ways to do it as well. And I actually had sort of the same read as Drew, but I also figured that the Yang doctors will catch you on that, and they'll they'll help you figure out the best way to encode that. There's a couple of other places where we have options, and they're now encoded completely separately, and it doesn't seem that that's the most efficient. But that's why we have Yang doctor reviews, is to catch those things.
Fair enough. Yeah. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is great work by actually a lot of people, and I appreciate you spearheading it.
Igor? Igor?
Yes.
Clicker.
Good morning. I'm Igor Briskin from Huawei, and I will get the update on the document that is authors basically published. So I will not introduce it again. I will remind that this is a document that is meant to be sort of a Wikipedia for everything we are doing in terms of tunnel and topology modeling, and all extended definitions, figures, modeling concepts, use cases, all those things basically are meant to go there. Since last IETF, this document was adopted as a working group document, and it was basically progress, but not as much as I would want to see it progressing. So we had a lot of pre-published comments basically for the T topology model. And many of them were something like that. It would be nice to have like more text describing this concept or this concept, and we would like to see it in the document. And our standard answer was go and look into this modeling tutorial. And people liked this approach. They were satisfied, and more importantly, they liked the structure. Basically defining model and short strict definitions in one document, and extended definitions and explanations, use cases in the other. So maybe it's a good idea to follow this pattern. So we all know that basically things like link, tunnel, and connections, these words do not have intrinsic definition. It just labels to concept, and it takes a lot of standardization effort to basically to get these concepts right, aligned, and to assign right labels to this concept. And if you do it right, then the discussions and move very, very fast, as we know. Conversely, if you defined if you assign different names to the same things, or call with the same name different or even worse overlapping things, then it takes a lot of time to move anywhere. Right. So I think we did a reasonably good job with the covering topology model, but there is a lot of work that still has to be done with the tunnel modeling. Okay, so since last IETF, we provided updates, for example, and description as to how do you provision multi-domain tunnels. What does it mean, tunnel segment? Does it mean connection segment? How do you configure, how to manipulate this configuration, so forth? Thanks to Italo, who provided the text. So basically, in the future, we would like to ask people to point out what things in the models are not covered with the description, and even better to provide some text so that we can review and put it into this document. Again, it's very important. We put a lot of effort developing these models, and the difference between published as just RFCs or published as RFCs and widely deployed in the operator networks, this could be the quality of this document. So, for example, recently I have a question from a client who said, can I do things like that? I want a tunnel that would be the best compromise between the cost and the delay. And I said, sure, here's what you do. You go and basically configure your optimization criteria, assign weight, and stuff like that. Oh, it's very clever, but what about where it's described? So, and basically, I cannot answer anything because this is exactly the place where things like that needs to be described. So, basically, again, we need to a lot of more of discussions, and we need quite a bit of contribution. Yeah.
Daniele Ciccarelli, a question. Do we need the multi-domain T tunnel? Can you go back to the slide, please? This one. Isn't this a point-to-point virtual network?
No. We are talking about a single tunnel which goes through multiple domains. Okay, so basically it could start on the client and then go through several provider domains and on another client device. So basically, if you have a supercontroller which basically oversees the entire network, then it takes a request as a tunnel. But when the supercontroller is a client of the domain controllers, then this application needs to split the configuration and to instruct each domain controller as to what to do. Okay, so for example, there could be a domain where the tunnel just starts but not ends. There could be
what is different from two-stitched tunnels like in AVM?
It depends. So, for example, the tunnel, as we defined, starts on tunnel termination points, and this is where the tunnel is used, right, where it adopts the client traffic. But, for example, transit domain, it doesn't have any termination points. It just has access links and labels assigned, resources allocated on access links. So it's a big difference, right? And there could be a lot of different cases where, for example, you have a segment for working connection, but end-to-end connection for protection. So all these things are covered through this.
It's just an implementation decision because from the external point of view, it's something that goes end-to-end and spans multiple domains. Whether you wanted to have termination points or not in the transit domains is just an implementation, but the end-to-end result is the same.
Yeah, but this is what you think from the point of view of the client, right? So if you think the client is the supercontroller itself, right? So it's very different. So as a supercontroller, I control the domain controller through the same model. Okay, so basically, if I'm a just transit domain, I have to configure the segment differently compared if I would have just overlooking a single domain and go from termination point to termination point.
Daniele, I think that you are a bit missing the difference between CMI and MPI. At the CMI, you can request a virtual network type 1 between the two ingress points. Then the supercontroller needs to understand how to implement that, and it has to set up a tunnel which goes from multiple domains. And then we will request to the two PNC to set up the tunnel segments following what Igor is describing in this slide. So this, for me, is more happening at the MPI, and what you are asking is what's happening at the CMI, where the customer will request a virtual network between.
Yeah, but my My point is, why do you need this concept at the MPI level? Why can't you just ask for a intra-domain tunnel to the MPI, to the domain controller?
But we're not talking about interfaces, right? We're talking about models that actually could be applied
I'm
to...
saying you don't need this.
Well, you say that, okay, but our clients say different things, right? And I can tell you how many time we spent explaining how to provision domain segments. For example, the domain could just carry protection connection and not working connection, right? So how can I instruct a domain controller to just provision protection connection or protect a segment of a protection connection?
Daniele, I think you actually provided the answer to your own question, is that there's different ways to do it. And this is just an informational document talking about one way to do it. So for those that want to look at it this way and want to understand, this is helpful there. Now, the other case that you're talking about, that should be covered in here too.
I'm saying, why do we need the two methods to do the same things?
We have those two methods because we build toolboxes here, and we have a toolbox with lots of tools in it. You can sometimes use two different tools to do the same thing. Operators like doing things differently. I mean, we know that.
In my opinion, we are just overcomplicating the T-tunnel model, which is already very complicated.
This is an informative description. This isn't changing anything that's already in the model.
Right. So basically, his question not about this particular document per se. It's basically how we're doing T-tunnel modeling. And the confusion is the level at which you control tunnels, right? So there could be at the client level where the client doesn't care whether it's a single domain or multiple domain. And there is a hierarchical controller which basically cares a lot about provisioning particular pieces of this tunnel, right? And the point is that we use the very same model to do both things.
Yeah, I think the answer of there's different ways to do it, and vendors choose to implement differently, and carriers choose to deploy differently, and covering both is a worthwhile thing. I mean, we already have the definitions that do support both, so why not we have the description that supports both?
Yeah, the point is that we do not describe it well enough, and this is actually a question to this document, and this is our update for this particular IETF. Okay, but similar things, it was just an example. Similar things, there's a lot of other things that needs to be described as tediously as this one.
Before we leave this one, I had a question. I'm not quite sure if it's better for the model documents that Tarek discussed or for this one. One of the things that happened towards the end of the TE topology is sort of because of its complexity, we added a section that described how it should be augmented, how it should be added to by for technology-specific extensions or other uses in the future. And we've already heard that that's being helpful and being used in other working groups. Should we be doing the same type of thing for the other models that Tarek talked about, and would the right place be there or in this document?
So I would say that I actually raised many times why Lou is not asking for the same thing that he has asked for a T-topology model, and he will inevitably ask for that. But the other thing is he's the only one who raised this issue because in theory, any model could be augmented, and this means that anything that we produce has to have this session, basically. How do you augment this and how to use this? How do you actually build augmentations based on this model? Okay, so if we have to do this, we have to do this pretty much for all models that we produce. We actually addressed his comment in the T-topology model, but I think if we do this, this document is actually a right place to do.
Okay.
So Tarek, as the co-author of the T-tunnel model, Igor, because we're defining a technology agnostic model, and we need to have at least a section that says, okay, this is how you augment it for technology X and that. Definitely the tutorial might, I think use cases, definitely how to use the model will be here in this document. Augmentation, I agree, maybe Lou, we will add a section to clarify how to augment for different technologies.
We're defining some pretty complex modules in this group. unlike other groups. I don't think I've come across a module that's as complex as TE topology, for example. So the fact that we have to have this type of guidance and other modules don't, I'm completely okay with. And that's with any hat, including NetBot chair, by the way. Which document we do it in, I think, it's up to the authors to sort of decide. And, I'm happy with what was just said.
So just basically to point out, we have sections describing how do you do abstraction of topology model, right? How do you do topology negotiation between client and so, so basically how do you do augmentation falls under the same category as this kind of things, right? So we need a section that says, okay, this is our proposed guidance, how do you do augmentations, technology specific or domain specific or layer specific or whatever, right?
Yeah, and I think I heard Tarek said he thinks an initial piece should go in with the module, the document that defines the module, and that sounds reasonable.
Yeah. So our strategy is that we put short definitions in the same document where define models and extended definitions and explanation in this.
Yeah, I just think it's gray area which one this is.
Yeah.
You could argue it either way, and your solution sounds good. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other comments? John? Thanks, Igor.
Good morning. I'm going to present the status of path computational PC, the update, on behalf of the other long list of co-authors and contributors. First, credits. We would thank a lot people like Carlo Perrocchio and Francesco Lazzari from Ericsson for their great contribution, review, and also proposal for enhancement in the young model, and all the people that weekly with the TA tunnel try to solve the common issue between path computation and tunnel model, Tarek, Igor, Xufeng, and Pavan, and the other that is attending the weekly call. Okay, summary of the changes. We just made just a few modification about the text because we made a great restructuring that was triggered by last IETF by Michael Schaaf comments. And so we are structuring a lot. And now we consider that the main body is stable. And the most update of this version was addressing young model, both bugs and enhancement and alignment, in particular with the tunnel model. For enhancement, we added the possibility to have access level in case of multi-domain scenario in order to be able for the domain controller to understand the label for the previous and following domain. We update the model in alignment with TA tunnel with bidirectional Boolean for TA tunnel to indicate whether the path is unidirectional or bidirectional. We introduced two new grouping related to the fact that path computation does not need for all the attributes that is coming from tunnel model, but this is a subject that we can have open and this can discuss later. And we align with TA tunnel with the new structure of the explicit root hop to define the TA link, to a number TA link with TA link plus TNODD, like shown before by Tarek. Then there are a couple of some bugs that we correct. Most also for alignment with the use of the topology identifier from TIA types. We use generic path disjointness grouping both again for TIA types model, and we remove the container that previously was wrong in path computation, because path computation is stateless RPC, and we added a container providing and storage information that is not the case for a stateless path computation. Okay, here we have basically an open issue that we would like to report with the other co-authors in the working group. In the GitHub, you can see in the 31 issue that we ask to diminish some TIA tunnel attributes that are not needed in our view for path computation, like name of the tunnel, identifier of the tunnel, description, provisioning state, other attributes that in our mind it is not needed for path computation. So a proposal was not to use in path computation RPC these attributes, but there was raised during our discussion weekly comment about the fact that you should have policy-based path computation that, let me say, make important to leave again these attributes because link to specific way to make the path computation. The policy is not specified yet, and well, we report this open issue, and we are open to hear about from the working group what is thinking about this type of issue for policy that apparently is hidden behind the server and providing a way to make some path computation. And so we are waiting for some comments.
Igor Briskin, Huawei. So basically, I do not advocate this approach for the following reason. Basically, when you request a path, you assume...
Sorry, Igor, which approach?
The approach of dropping configuration parameters from the path computation request, such as a tunnel name, for example. Okay. So the logic is that when you request a path, so you assume that you will, when you specify the same constraints for the tunnel will take the path that returned by the path computation, right? But for example, we see a lot of use cases where the server basically takes the configuration parameters and applies local policies based on the configuration parameters to put more constraints, relax others, and stuff like that. For example, there could be a policy that says that if you all tunnels that starts with the name blah blah blah, basically has to use should go always through these links or through these affinities or stuff like that. So now, if we drop this from the path computation request, it could be the case that path computation will return one path, but the tunnel will take totally different paths. We had in the Huawei networks, Huawei clients, we have exactly that, and they complain that your path computation says it will go this way, but we pull the fiber and it actually goes totally different way. And the point is that there are certain policies in place that put extra constraints on the path computation for real tunnels. Therefore, what we are saying is that basically we do not lose anything from keeping, say, tunnel name in the request, but we allow for the server to do exactly the same thing for the computation for the tunnel versus basically when it actually sets up the tunnel. Okay. In other words, we do not see path computation request as it is. We are saying, please provision tunnel in the path computation mode. Basically, just compute path for the tunnel and return it, but do not set up a tunnel versus actually return the path based on the path computation constraints. And there is certain subtlety in that.
Dieter Belanokia. I actually don't understand why we need specific parameters to actually support the policy-based or constraint-based path computation without modeling it explicitly. So I would prefer to use an approach where policy is actually clearly defined, or policy rules are defined, and then of course you can when you send a path computation request include an identifier that triggers the server to, or instructs the server to apply a specific policy rule. I think using input parameters that do not obviously indicate that this is related to policy is not a good approach in my opinion.
I think, Igor, the problem I see here is where this type of policy is hidden, because the user may not know that there is this policy, and even if we add these attributes, the user doesn't provide, and you get exactly the same problem that you say, because even if the path computational PC has the attribute, and the user doesn't provide the attribute, assuming that this is not needed, then it gets exactly false response. So that's why we have to have a very clean design on the if you want to have the policy, we have to have a very clean design of these policy issues, because people need to know that in some way, because otherwise the risk is that we have the model, but the user use it in the wrong way. And I think we have to have a very clear definition of what's going to happen and why all these attributes are needed for path computation. Otherwise, if I get the questions in working group call as an author, I cannot answer to the why do we have this input. So I would like to have very solid input to what to do on here. Thank you.
It's a good discussion. I don't want to cut it short, but we're running out of time. So please just try to keep the discussion a little brief.
Sure.
And but let's keep going.
Igor Briskin, Huawei. So this is exactly the point. The client is not supposed to know the local policies that set up in the operator networks. Basically, when the client sets up a tunnel, he doesn't assume that there's policy in place. Okay, the only purpose here is to get exact same path for the tunnels and for the path computation request. And that's all you can achieve, and server can achieve that if he gets all the information for the tunnel.
Igor, a point of clarification. Are you asking for these to be required or optional? Or
all parameters are optional. So basically everything that we provide in configuration is optional, right? Both for the tunnel and both for the path computation. Okay, I just want to have it an option to specify exactly everything that I would do for the tunnel.
Just to support Igor's point from a different point of view, in PCEP as well, when you can just simply ask for a path computation request, or you can also include the LSP object. And when you include the LSP object, you kind of identify that this path computation is for a particular LSP or a particular tunnel. So I kind of see that there is some advantage in carrying these T tunnel attributes, at least the name, identifier, description to start with, similar to PCEP.
Sorry, Drew, in the case of the PCEP, if I remember well, you introduce LSP object, for example, to say, okay, you made path computation avoiding, for example, or following this type of LSP and so on. So it's related to the fact that you wanted to have a link with this, but it's explicit.
No, that's incorrect. We can discuss it.
But it is anyway explicit, not hidden. This is the problem.
So it seems like we have opinions on both sides. Is it worth just doing a little straw poll of the room to get a feel? What would you like to do? How do you like to proceed? You would prefer not to have it. There's people who prefer to have it. Should we get a sense of the room of which way?
we would prefer not to have it because as soon as we don't understand the real needs to have these attributes, we prefer not to.
All right, so let's ask two questions. Who would like to go with the recommendation of the authors, and who would like to include these parameters as Igor said, as optional parameters? So two choices. So first, who would like to go with the recommendation or thinks the recommendation of the authors is correct? So a few people. How many think that it would be better to include these as optional parameters? I would say it's relatively more percentage-wise. It's actually a big difference, but neither of them had like overwhelming numbers. So it's a small sample. So I think the indication from this room is to keep it in. It'd be good to raise it again on the working group list to get consensus. See if we can get consensus there. But if we went on this room, we would not go with this. At least that's my read. Do you agree?
I thought that I agree it's a small sample, but let's take it to the list. I thought I saw more hands go up for the latter option. But,
I have no idea what I said, but I meant to say that there was percentage-wise significantly more for the second one, but it is a small sample.
Yeah, my suggestion is that at least would be explicitly said use cases that can show why we need to that, because in this case I don't understand why.
So that's a good thing to take to the list. I'll remind you as the editors, it's not actually the authors, but an editor of a working group document is responsible for reflecting the consensus of the working group, even if it's not their own. So right now we have an indication of a direction. Let's take the list, try to confirm through discussion both sides, and as a contributor, you're welcome to argue your point and see if you can convince people.
No, I agree. Let's take the list. It's what's important, those who want the attribute to clarify, because what is scaring me if they are optional and the user may make mistakes in using those attributes. So we need to provide a good guidelines to avoid the mistakes in the usage. So I'm okay to go and to the working group consensus, but we need to have a very clear description on how they are used.
Yeah, I'm not sure I completely understand your point, but okay. Let's have it on the list.
Okay.
Just a complete. Okay, this is the status of the open issue. But if I have to shrink, I can. So the status is reported in our GitHub, and actually we have closed 10 open issue, and then we have still 8 open issue, 4 that is specific for RPC, 3 are in common with TIA tunnel, we discuss with them, and 1 is related to the text for the new appendix on the draft. We need to. It has been requested to have a path computation example, and so we need to update. And for next step, we need to resolve the current open issue, and then also for path computation is open the door the guideline for technology-specific augmentation, in particular for sync up with actually for the OTA tunnel model. So we need to discuss with the authors of the tunnel model that, by the way, are the same. Okay.
Thank you. Shafak? We are running behind by about 8 minutes. So.
Good morning. I'm Xufeng Liu from Water Networks. So I'm presenting 2 technology-specific extensions to the TE topologies with the 2 drafts. First one is the layer 3 TE topology on behalf of the authors here. So the principle here is that we want to reuse and we want to extend the existing TE topologies. So layer 3 topology, we have layer 3 topology already defined, and we also have a TE topology defined. Here we are trying to link them together. So we have a layer 3 TE topology, which is an extension to the layer 3 topology model. We have augmentation there, and the augmentation contains all the leaf refs, reference to the TE topology model. So this is our strategy. And just a recap, the changes since the last revision, the draft was adopted as a working group document in March. Since then, we have done some updates aligned with the latest dependencies, draft-wise, document-wise, and added some description to the model structure, and also updated the security section. So here are all the dependencies we have. We updated it with the Yangtze NMDA, and we have two RFC published for the base topology model and the layer 3 topology model. And the T tunnels and the T topology model has been updated significantly since last time, so we also sync with them. So here is the way we do the referencing. So the T topology, layer 3 T topology model may or may not be congruent with the layer 3 topology. So we have this reference in case the left side the T topology 1 and on the right side the non-TE topology, if they have pretty much congruent one-to-one mapping or non-congruent. So we can have the topology reference from 1 to 2. Then we don't need to re-specify anything repeatedly. So here, if we have differences between the, we need to have a node referencing, then we can have this R3 to the R3 prime and similar things to the termination points and the link. So we have all the referencing here. Another piece of the document, we describe the technology-specific extensions to the TE link. So in this case, it will be packet-specific extensions for the technology-specific extension. We have extension to the performance metric. This topic is still being discussed in the TE tunnel. So once that finalized, we will finalize this also. We updated document for the security section, and there are a few other edits we need to complete. So here's the list. We also need to have the young doctor reviews. Now we hope get more comments from the group. And that's for this document. The next one will be another technology-specific topology. That's for the segment routing. So for segment routing, we augment the layer 3 network topology with the ISR-specific parameters. So in that case, since we already have a layer 3 TE, we also have the ISR topology. So if we want to do the segment routing TE, then we can have multiple inheritance. The changes since last time, we did similar things to the as we did with the TE topology, layer 3 TE topology. We added the we did synchronization with the latest dependencies, and we covered two more missing features. One is the link protection and the bundling. So here the similar updates for the dependency documents. We describe how do we augment the ISR parameters. If it's a topology-wise, we have this topology global view, so it's easy for us than the device ISR model. So we have this topology attributes, and we have node level attributes, and the prefix attributes, termination points, some extensions to the SR specific attributes. And we used to miss a flag to indicate for the link protection for the SR purpose. So put that back here. For the boundary, since the T topology model already specified the component, so they can do the component link and all the boundary techniques here. So we're trying to reuse that, and we didn't add anything specific for SR. So that's the current approach we are taking. So if we have any feedback, please let us know. Then we also need to complete some of the features and the edits, and then also reviews and comments. That's all we have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. If you don't mind, as you do updates to the SR document, drop an email to the Spring Working Group. Just let them know that the work is progressing. We had said that we'd try to keep in sync with them a little bit. So
yes, yeah, we should do.
Okay, and I don't know if you've already done it for this one, but if you can do it for this one, that'd be helpful.
Sure.
Okay, thanks.
I'm Sha from Huawei.
I'm sorry, what was your name?
My name is Sha from Huawei. I have a question is about this draft will include the multi-domain scenario.
In which case, which draft?
This SRT project.
Mm-hmm.
I think SR scenario may have the SRT may have multi-domain scenario. So I want to know how to include the across the SBR link the information to this topology.
Right. That from in terms of multi-domain, so the T we already handle the multi-domain. So in the term of the SR, pretty much a similar situation. That Igor probably will give you one more description there.
So sorry, I meant to ask Lou a question. Do we need a session how to augment these topologies? In your opinion?
If you think that this is something that is regularly going to be augmented, sure. This is a technology-specific extension augmenting the TE topology, base TE topology work. So I would expect that it would follow the augmentation guidelines of the base TE topology. If you think that as authors that this is something that's going to be augmented regularly and it's complex to go augment, sure. If you think it's straightforward, I don't think you need it.
How would we know whether it will be actively augmented or not?
I think you have to use your best judgment as technology experts.
Okay, thank you.
I think the SRT topology. I think if you want to provide the SBR link, right? Perhaps you will use the BGP or EPE. So I think it's different from the R3T multi-domain scenario. So I think perhaps you can consider this scenario in the SR domain.
We can talk about the details of why the current T topology, the base model, cannot handle that situation. But I think probably, yeah, should be, yeah.
My name is Young. On behalf of co-authors, I will present. Now I realize why Igor and Shufeng want me to present use cases. For those who understand, laugh, but otherwise, let's move on. Yeah, I think.
By the way, you're scheduled for 10 minutes. If you could shave a minute or two off, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yes, that's good. Yeah, it was adopted since 101. There's no changes in content. Just to recap, what are the use cases? You can read the document. I'm not gonna specify all the list. So basically, SF aware topology. This is kind of the example. We have base T topology. And we basically, in the solutions, we have SF resources, how they are connected to the node through LTP and TTPs, and some of SF functions internal to the node and others external. So those things are captured here. And so based on that topology available to the controller can set up TE paths with SF constraints together. So it's kind of joint optimization to give the best combinations of SF resource with the TE connectivity. I think we can solicit more use cases. If you are motivated, you can do so. There's a room for more use cases, but our aim is to stabilize this draft to be ready for the last working group call. And in case this doesn't go through, but this might be a good information to store somewhere, maybe in the solutions as an appendix, if that's the way to go. But we're going to press on to mature this to be ready for the last call in the next revision. Okay. Any questions? Okay. Okay. Now, this is a solutions draft based on use cases.
Young, if the documents are ready at the same time, putting in the use cases as an appendix in the solution may be a good idea.
Yeah.
But don't hold up either document for each other.
Right. Okay. Good. So the main gist of the Yang model for SF-enabled topology is we basically describe connectivity matrices with additional SF information. There are three different types of connectivity matrices that we need. We call SF to SF connectivity matrix. Basically, SF resources are locally available, interconnected within the node. And then we kind of describe through a connection point how those resources are connected using connectivity matrix construct. And second type is SF to LTP CM. In this case, resources are on the neighboring TE node. So we use a LTP construct to associate TE topology with this external node constructs that is residing outside of TE node. And another one is SF to TTP connectivity matrix. TTP is an adaptation point from client to server. In some cases, the resources are connected through TTPs. So we basically outline these three types of extended connectivity matrices. So this is the example of how SFs are related with T topology elements, as you see here. Yeah, so this is basic T node construct. We have LTPs and TTPs. And in this case, SF resources reside in the node through connection point construct. We have a bunch of connection points. And then in this example, we have three SF functions. They are interconnected through CPs and also virtual link construct, which is defined by NFB. This is actually a modeling recommended by NFB. So we basically put it together with T construct in IETF model. Yeah, so this is what I just described for the sake of time. And we make use of virtual link, SC virtual link concept that connects different SFs along with the CP points. So this is an example that we added, example of SF to LTP connectivity matrix. In this case, we try to give you some example how compute node can be constructed using T topology, using SF to LTPs connectivity matrices. So this basically, if you have this topology, then you have integrated cross-stratum resource model, network plus data center, compute, storage together, so that in case you have requests that make advantage that needs both the connectivity and, for instance, virtual network mobility, this model will provide that. Okay, so we added this model as an example in this revision. Igor?
No, go on. I just want to
ask
one question after that.
Yeah, so continue to refine this draft. So let's see feedback from the working group. It may not be ready for working group last call, but we're going to press on with more refinement in the next revision. Okay.
I have a question actually to chairs and AD. Can you put on the topology with the very first picture that you had?
This one?
In the previous presentation.
Yeah.
In the previous, basically the topology was SF.
Topology SF, okay. Oops. In the use case.
Yeah, here, okay.
Yeah.
Basically, we have unusual challenge with this work. So,
who are you asking the question? You're asking Deborah?
I'm asking you and Deborah.
Okay.
So I want to briefly describe the challenge. So basically, the idea was that we don't want to overstep the tools of ETSI and other SDOs that basically try to describe the service functions, define the service function types, objects, and stuff like that. Okay, so that's we basically we're hoping that we identify the service functions by global IDs, and the curious client can look up the other data stores, like for example described in Tosca by ETSI, right? And define what is it that this service function is doing and how close in functionality it is to the other service function that we want to actually, replace or put basically to direct our tunnels in the different direction, but achieve the same processing on the packets and on the traffic. So now what we start doing is we start to actually doing exactly that, overstepping tools. We defined like general resources, like in terms of CPUs and memories, but we are still not going into the details of what exactly this function is doing and so forth. Okay, now we have two choices. Either we wait until the work is done in ETSI, which seems to go forever, okay, or we can start basically repeating what they're doing and then thrown away as soon as we notice that this basically is not needed and the work is done sufficiently in ETSI.
So your question is, which direction should we go?
Yes.
Wait or move forward?
Yes.
Okay. Adrian, is it a follow-up? Please go ahead.
So it's not the first
name, please.
Name, yeah. Adrian Farrell. It's not the first time this precise question has been asked in the IETF, because obviously there are other working groups that are working on service function chaining. What we did in putting together the BGP control plane for the service function overlay in the BESS working group was to say, let's have a single integer identifier of the type of a service function and apply no interpretation of that within anything we touch, so that you can then use whatever other mechanism you have for describing the service function, and that description then is indexed by a single number. And as far as I can see, the processing that you need to do here could live off that index as well.
Actually, that was already included. Yeah, in the model.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did, basically. But the problem is that if we want to, say, replace one service function with another, then the client needs to understand to what extent it could be done, right? So just obscure IDs wouldn't do that.
Right. So as an example, we put some how to abstract resources on the compute node, but that's as an example. We didn't want to put as a...
So from a chair perspective, what you're talking about really goes beyond our scope, what we do in this working group.
Correct.
I can't say whether it's beyond the scope of the IETF or not, but that's something we can work with the AD on
right.
offline and figure out where's the right place to do it, what's the right way to do it. You know, do we just create a basically a container where other information can then augment this model to bring in more information? You know, there's different technical approaches. We have to sort of figure out where the right group is, where the right expertise is. But I don't think it's this group. And going back to Igor's previous question on the last presentation, you know, maybe this is where you put an augmentation guidelines. Say that this is beyond what we're going to do here, but this model can serve the foundation, and we expect it to go here. That information goes
here. Okay, thanks.
And also similar to the guidance that was given to Shufeng earlier, keep the SFC working group in the loop as you progress.
Yeah, okay. Next.
So RMR.
Hi, my name is Abhishek Deshmukh. I'll be presenting RMR RSOP extensions for RMR.
Also, we're running behind. You're scheduled for 15. Please keep it under 10.
Yeah,
including
I'll try to do.
Yeah. Thank you.
So this draft has been presented in MPLS working group before, but recently it was moved to TEAS. So RMR will be presenting first time in TEAS. So I'll just give you a brief overview of RMR. With RMR, we are planning to make it easier to use MPLS in ring topologies. Rings are like very commonly found in access and aggregation networks. But the use of MPLS is not very limited in those topologies. So with RMR, you can easily configure rings and use MPLS with that. The main advantage of using RMR is the configuration is very easy. The base RMR draft by Kirti, it defines the mechanisms to bring up ring LSPs and also the auto discovery of those rings. And once the auto discovery is complete, auto discovery process defined in the base draft is complete, then each node initiates two LSPs, one in clockwise direction and one in the anti-clockwise direction. So in this diagram, all of the LSPs, like all of the nodes, will create an LSP to itself, and the ingress and the egress node for those LSPs is same. So for example, the LSP starting at R1 will go along and form a loop and end at R1. Similarly, each node will also create two LSPs to itself. And so by doing this, so a ring of n nodes will have 2n LSPs. And another differentiating point of these LSPs are these are multi-point to point LSPs. So by multi-point to point, we mean that the transit node can also be the ingress for that ring LSP. So in this diagram, so although the LSP signaling wise, it is starting and ending at R1, there will be also each transit router can also send traffic in that LSP ending at R1. So there will be an ingress route at 2, 3, 4, and so on. And also another distinguishing factor of these LSPs is that the bandwidth can change hop by hop. I'll describe in further future slides what it means. This is like what happens during failure scenarios. So the link N3 and N4 in this diagram, let's say the link a link is failing. So then the traffic moves. So we don't have any bypass LSPs pre-programmed like RSVP, vanilla RSVP TE. So we just use the LSP going in the opposite direction to divert the traffic. So for example, the clockwise LSP starting at N1, when the link at N3 and 4 fails, it will switch traffic to the anti-clockwise LSP in the reverse direction. So that is the local failure, local repair, and also N3 will inform N2 that there is a failure. So N2 will also take corrective action and start sending traffic in the reverse direction. To signal these LSPs, we have the extensions. So we have a new session object with class this RMR tunnel, and it will have the instead of the destination address, it will have the ring anchor node address, which is the address of the source LSP, which is where it is originated. And it will have the ring flags, whether the LSP is going clockwise and anti-clockwise, and also it will have the ring ID, which is constant throughout the existence of ring. So the ring ID is basically whatever the ring is configured with. So in this diagram, the ring ID is 17. So you just configure that ring ID, and for all of the LSPs going through that ring, we'll use the same ring ID. So the sender template object, we are not really changing anything in sender template, but the semantics are we are slightly changing the semantics. I'll explain that in the later slide. So for the bandwidth management, we need the different semantics for the sender template. As I was saying earlier, for these ring LSPs, the bandwidth can change hop by hop. So the LSP is starting and ending at R1. So it can originally it will signal it with let's say 0 bandwidth, and then some service comes at node R5, and it wants to increase the bandwidth for the segment from R5 to R1 for the LSP. And also some service comes up at R6, which wants increased bandwidth from R6 to R1. Then the effective bandwidth is like from R1 to R5. There is no bandwidth reserved for that LSP. From R5 to R1, there is 1 gig bandwidth reserved, and from R6 to R1, that segment is requesting 2 gig, so it will be addition of 1 gig plus 2 gig, so there will be 3 gig bandwidth reserved for that. So the way we do it is each node add its the sender template object, and then R5 wants to increase the bandwidth, then R5 will send an additional sender template object with the sender address of R5. And similarly, in the path message, that is, and similarly, R6 will also add another sender template object in the path message. So for the LSP segment from R6 to R1, there are 3 sender templates. And similarly, the corresponding residue message from R1 will have 3 filter specs from R1 to R6, and then from R6 to R5, there will be 2 filter specs.
Are you using FF or SE?
SE, yeah. So, and if there is, let's say, from link R8 to R9, there is only 1 gig bandwidth available, and we are requesting 3 gigs for the LSP from R6 to R1. For segment R6 to R1, then in that case, node R8 will send a path error message with just the sender address for R6, so that only that particular reservation request will get denied, and the existing reservations will just continue to work as it is. And when, let's say, this R5 no longer needs that bandwidth reservation, then it will just send a modified sender template with 0 bandwidth. And another point is that we will not actually change any bandwidth, but it will, we will not actually change any labels. Only the bandwidth accounting will change when we are doing this. And so these are the extensions. So the next steps are we still have to identify how to use the express links. Express links is, let's say there is a link between R4 and link connecting R4 and R7. Then how to signal that link, that thing we still have to identify the best way to use it. And we need some more feedback from the working group. Any questions?
All right, thank you. Okay. Suddenly rings are hot. We had some presentation on Monday in DetNet on rings, yesterday in MPLS, and now here. Maybe we should figure out if there's more overlap going on. I know Lo already sent a message, I think it was privately, talking about how to do some alignment between MPLS, but there might be some opportunities with DetNet as well.
So yesterday's presentation was about using multicast. So this is concentrating on the unicast ring LSP.
Yeah. So I think there was also point to multipoint there.
Yeah.
And the one on Monday was also point to multipoint. So it's all about ring protection. I understand there are different flavors, but we should figure out how we make sure we're not stepping on each other's toes there.
Okay.
All right. Thanks. That's more a chair comment than chair-to-chair comment than chair for you on the specific drop.
Sure.
Thank you very much. All right, so now to PCE and native IP. Just give me a second. Don't click. Don't click.
Okay.
So, hello. I just give some review and update for the PCE native IP network related draft. So here we have finished the 3 related draft, and 2 in the in TEAS working group, and 1 is in the PCE working group. Here I just give review summary and the plan for the next step. Include 3 parts: the scenario and the solution review, and update the content from the last meeting, and for a plan for these drafts. First is the scenario and solution review. Then we have the in 2 large network. One is the native IP network, and another is the MPLS network. There are several scenarios that we want to do in the traffic engineering work in the native IP network, and we also investigate the current solution for the traffic engine and find they are not very suitable for the native IP network. So we think after the introduction of the PCE or SDN controller in the network, we can finish such work more easily. So in this scenario draft, we have introduced about 4 scenarios for the use case of the PCE in our network. And we also do the simulation offline and to verify the applicability of the PCE in our network, and we get the better effect than the traditional distributed calculation. So we think if we put the controller or PCE in our network, we can get the wonderful result for our traffic engineer in our network. This is the scenario network, scenario draft, and another is the solution draft. In this solution, there are 3 key points for the solution. The first is we want to deploy the PCI SDN controller in our network, and the PCI SDN controller is responsible for the complex path communication to optimize the necessary traffic upon the real network situation. And the second point is we want to build a multi-BGP session via the PCI protocol and distribute the different prefix via the different BGP session between the edge router and the IR route reflector. The third point is we want to manipulate the path to the BGP next of this prefix via the PCI protocol to different the traffic forwarding paths. So if we use such solution, we need not only change or update the control plane of the router, and we need not update the forward plane, such as the solution for the SR. So we can keep all our unpassed route not still we can exploit our router already in our network. So this is the solution key point. So for the two draft related TEAS, we just do some editor update from the last meeting, and for the first draft we add some description for the security consideration, and for the first draft we add the coauthor from Mr. Zhen Qiang from China Mobile, because they have the similar network constructor with us. So the forward plane of this draft, we are more welcome for the more scenario and the solution for UPC in the native IP network. And if there are new scenario or new solution for this in this case, we can produce new PCI extension. Currently we just do PCI extension in this draft, and this extension can accomplish our aim for the current scenario and the solution. So we because we are very needed such solution for this scenarios, and we want to finish the standard of this draft, and also waiting for the implementation for the PCI extension, and so we can deploy them or try them in our network. And the final is thanks for all the co-author and expert for the past reviews. Okay.
Thank you. Have you considered the work that's emerging in DetNet for IP TE paths or TE flows?
As I know, the DetNet maybe requires the change of the forwarding plane, control plane, forwarding plane.
Yes.
And
you're right. DetNet is focusing on the forwarding plane, but not the control plane.
Yeah. So we just want to reuse our existing device in our network and do not want to change, because there are lots of router in our network and located in different places. So we think the easiest way is we just to change the control plane. So maybe do the PCI protocol update maybe more easily for deployment.
Okay, well, something to think about is what's coming down the pike, and from the working group standpoint, I know that's something that's going to probably come into this working group or be discussed. Probably not next IETF, but 2 or 3 IETFs from now. I would expect that to come in, and that'll be traffic engineering for IP, and this is traffic engineering for IP. It might make sense to think about both of them. And in terms of current forwarding planes, the current forwarding planes support policy-based routing mechanisms. So you may be able to do some things with the current forwarding plane. Anyway, it's something to think about offline, and be good to hear your thoughts on it in the future.
Okay, good.
Okay, so we're having some requested changes in ordering from presenter.
No, just a presenter change.
Oh, okay. So thank you very much. I think we're ready for the next. This is ACT and VN, right?
We're still about 5 minutes, running behind by 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'll try to be quick.
Is this the right one?
Hi, this is Dhruv, and I'll be presenting ACT and VN Yang. So quick update, we got adopted during the last IETF. There was a comment that there is some work in Ops working group as well, which deals with network overlay resource model. So we had a quick discussion, and we kind of convinced that the work that we are doing in ACT and VN can meet the requirements. So we integrated and consolidated, and that's why we have some new co-authors. We kind of did not update the Yang model per se this time. We have some things in the pipeline that we will be doing just after this IETF. We wanted to have a face-to-face discussion and resolve those things during this meeting. So the update basically clarified a few things, like what is the scope of the TE service mapping, which is anyway being presented in the next, in the agenda the next. And we added the reference and clarity with respect to these VN model could be created because of the service things coming from L3SM, L2SM, etc. And we clarified, because there were questions with respect to where is this VN topology. So we clarified that the VN topology is implemented with respect to the connectivity matrix, the abstract node connectivity matrix, which anyway I presented during the last IETF as well, the big change that we did before we got adopted. And the tunnels would be not in this model. You have to go through connectivity matrix, and from there you can refer and find the T-tunnel model. So status-wise, there is a new update coming in, so we look out for that, and we will try to refine the document and prepare the document along with, as the T-tunnel and other documents with Yang are moving along, we would also like to move the ACT and VN Yang as well. Others, I have backup if there is any questions regarding the model, but that's it from my side. So I think this was quick.
Okay, looks like we don't have any questions.
First of all, thanks a lot to Dhruv for the swap. Actually, I got some feedbacks on this draft right this morning. We didn't have the opportunity to talk about them, so I wanted to give some clarification based on those feedbacks. The main of which being the fact that when we speak about mapping, that can be source for confusion. Actually, we use the term mapping there, but what we really mean is binding, in the sense that this draft provides the tool to create a binding relationship between an overlay service. In this case here, we provided the support for layer 3 SM, layer 2 SM, layer 1 CSM, and the underlay infrastructure, traffic engineered infrastructure used to carry those services, being it an ACTN virtual network to start with, but we now also provide the support for direct binding against the TE topology and the TE tunnel. What's the main rationale for this work and for this kind of binding between overlay and underlay? The very first use case is network slicing. Basically, we wanted to provide overlay services with guaranteed KPIs, SLAs, guaranteed requirements that can only be provided by a traffic engineered infrastructure. So, for example, if you wanted to have a classical layer 3 VPN without any guaranteed KPIs and so on, you just go for the layer 3 SM, you ask for a layer 3 VPN, you don't ask to bind it to any tunnel or infrastructure. If on the other side, you wanted to offer a different type of service, which is, for example, a layer 3 VPN with an amount of reserved bandwidth, minimum delay for the traffic of that VPN, what you're going to do is to bind that to a TE tunnel or a virtual network that was computed and provisioned with, for example, minimum delay, a path along using the resources along the path with a minimum delay. This is the rationale, the main reason behind this work, behind the draft. We have. Can you do the manually fix it? Thanks. So there was an issue. This guy.
Just real quick, can you go back one slide? That's
difficult.
Yeah. Basically, I just want to raise again the same point that I raised yesterday on CCAMP. So what I think we need is like a generic framework for building this binding relationship between services and tunnels, as you described, but on a more general base. Okay, so basically, whether it's binding to virtual network tunnels or binding to, say, infrastructure tunnels to carry, say, EVPL, right? Or as we discussed, for example, with Poland, there was a use case when you want to actually bind services to the tunnels inside the network, operated network. There are also such cases, like for protection purposes, stuff like that. There should be, in my opinion, a framework which describes, here's the tunnels, here's the services, and here how you can actually bind the service to the tunnels, either specifically or based on certain policies or basically to express preference, stuff like that.
I think this is already partially covered in these two slides. The first one is there was a discussion whether to go for the option on the right where we added this mapping, let's call it binding capabilities to the different service models. So it was done per service model, or go for a generic framework, like you said, in which you can add the services that you want to be to have this capability. Like these three are supported right now, but you can add any others, and add whatever type of underlay infrastructure. In addition to that,
sorry. What I'm saying is that I want to have something more generic. So you're describing only based on the boundaries between clients and network, but there could be such bindings happening at any node in the operator network. So some routers or nodes sitting inside the network. Okay,
So we're actually rehashing a little bit of a discussion we had at the last meeting. And at the last meeting, we said, can you guys talk offline and come back and report from that discussion? And based on what's happening here, it seems like that discussion didn't happen.
So we didn't do the homework.
Lou, actually, what you asked for was generalize it, which we did. And
do
this
you want
discussion,
me to quote myself? It sounds like there's an opportunity for good input into this document. So please work with people who made the comments to capture that.
Yeah, but this one is not same scope as what Igor is talking. Igor is talking about very generic framework. We are talking about CMI, very specific CMI extension.
It sounds like that discussion didn't happen. So it would be good to, in the context of this specific document, get with, it was Igor and Adrian, and I don't remember who else, I can look at the minutes. Get with them, spend some time, and see if you can come back with an agreement on the comments that were raised last time and the comments that are coming back up this time. And if the agreement is, hey, we're talking about different things, that's okay.
Yes, I think, we can talk about that.
At the end of the discussion, you decide you're talking different things, that's what you come back and say. But we shouldn't have the same conversation in successive meetings.
Adrian Farrell, Lou, I think you forget this is the IETF. That's precisely what we do.
Fine, but it's our job to stop it.
So Lou has asked me to put on technical advisor hat and look at this and the previous draft and the relationship with other models, which I will do. I also just went and looked at the minutes from the last meeting, and we all fumbled this because the people who commented should have gone on further and the authors should have come back to them. I think that something is missing from this document which would really, really help, which is to understand the flow of information between logical components.
Okay.
So we know where the service model comes from the service consumer and goes to the operator. And we know that the technology models or whatever go from the orchestrator down towards devices. Where does this new model fit? You don't have to answer now, but that needs to be in the document.
I think it's in the document. It applies to the CMI. So from the customer to the hierarchical SDN, the orchestrator, the MDFC. Then how you do it from there below is out of scope.
Right. So that will really help making that clear. And whether this then forms an augmentation of a generic augmentation of all service models or whatever is a separate thing. Yeah.
Okay. So I think this was very useful to drive the discussion. So Igor, what you're looking for is something from the MDSC below. We can,
in the interest of time, and since we had the action from the last meeting was go talk offline. Go talk offline.
Okay. Well, actually, just a few words about this. The different, let me say, policies for the binding can be implemented, can be asked.
In the interest of time, why don't we just jump to the end?
Which is. Thank you.
You're welcome. And he just gave us back a couple of minutes. We're still about 8 minutes behind, and we'll go on to. We look forward to hearing the results of that discussion. And which one? Yeah. 11.
Actually, back on track.
Yeah, this is Young Li again. Present ACT&T performance monitoring and network autonomics. Yeah, basically this particular draft and Young model supports when you create virtual networks and customer wants to see their performance metric in a generic way, like a delay and some of key performance index for their virtual network they are creating. So this Young model basically is on a CMI model that when customer requests VN, they also ask for performance monitoring on a VM virtual network level. And also virtual network may have multiple virtual members, which is kind of the eternal model. So we have those two layers. This is based on the use case. So we have two young modules, T KPI telemetry and also ACTN-T telemetry. One is just one single point-to-point tunnel level, and the other one is more virtual network that consists of multiple virtual members, and each of which is corresponding to TA tunnel. Also, we have a network autonomic scale-in, scale-out mechanism that based on the performance metric they want to subscribe to, they can ask for multiple combinations of performance metric to be combined through end operational or max min, depending on the metric. So when those things are met, it can be automatically scale in or scale out. So status is, we presented it a while ago, and this time major comment was from Pavan was, why don't you augment existing performance data from existing model? So we took that action, and then we had many conversations with Shufeng and Igor and Tarek. We found out the T types module has actually performance metric attribute as a grouping. So we make use that grouping to describe unidirectional performance monitoring data without changing that. And then because sometimes we need bidirectional, so we augmented, we added actually a bidirectional part in this module. So hopefully, I think we had a weekly meeting on the T topology design team, now T tunnel team. So hopefully this is answering Pavan's question. So basically, as you see here, T KPI telemetry, we reuse this grouping defined in T types through referencing for unidirectional, and then for bidirectional, we define here that groupings. And then ACTN-T telemetry actually reuses the grouping defined in the previous model, but also for the bidirectional. But unidirectional, we basically import from T types.
Excuse me, we have a question from Jabber. Greg Mirsky is asking, what is the difference between TE KPI telemetry and performance monitoring OAM?
We're not talking about OAM here. We are talking about, let me show it here. So we are talking about, for instance, unidirectional delay, unidirectional minimum delay. And we are talking about from customer perspective. Customer want to know their end-to-end.
So it's the difference between reporting the information and collecting the information.
Correct.
So OAM collects the information.
Right.
In this model, you're reporting the information.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
Right.
And then he follows up with the question, have you looked at STAMP or STAMP Yang data model?
Yeah, I think I have looked, that's the OAM model, right?
I have no idea.
Yeah.
I've never heard of it.
We're not reinventing any new wheel here. We're just referencing performance attribute from T types for link and tunnel and LSP that can be applied. So I don't think we are overlapping with that. This is customer perspective. They want to monitor this data for their own sake. So they can subscribe to it, and the network will provide it. And MDSC has to concatenate all this data from the lower level to give this meaningful information to the customer. So that's the scope.
Okay, so you think it covers a different scope? We'll see if Greg...
But I'll look at that reference. If Greg can point out exact reference, I can take a look and then give him a reply. Okay?
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. So we believe that this is very important work along with ACT and VN Yang, which is now adopted. Along with that, this one gives customer how their VNs are performing so that they can program telemetry and then autonomics as a part of zero-touch automation initiative. So we have tunnel model and VN level, and we believe that this is good basis for a working group adoption this time.
So Greg follows up that he thinks the STAMP module includes all PM metrics and more.
That's fine, but this is customer subscribing to that.
Did you look at it, or you're not sure which one it is?
I believe I looked at it in the past.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can, if you refresh that, we can take a look at. But
again, it's not me talking.
Yeah, nonetheless, that whether if they have young model, we can import, we can do it, but we have T types already have it, so there's no reason to do that. Because we are not reinventing the wheel here. We are just referencing from T types. Okay.
Doesn't look like Greg is going to join the queue or follow up. So with the understanding that there may be an additional model that needs to be, a module that needs to be looked at to deconflict, how many people think that this is the type of work that we should be working on? How many are interested in this work? I would say that's a reasonable number. How many have read this document? I think it's exactly the same, maybe one or two more. How many think that this work would be a reasonable starting point for the working group? More than have read it, so that's awesome. No, it means he presented well.
Good comment. I think it's worth.
It's Igor Briskin.
Igor Briskin, yeah. I think it's worth to look what Greg is pointing to, because T-types, it's not something which is carved in marble. Basically, we defined the best way we wanted to define the metrics, right? But there's no particular expertise how to do that. So if it could be enriched, and basically it would be a very welcome input.
Yeah.
We're going to make a chair out of Igor yet, because that's actually was going to be my next line. So thank you. I completely agree. If you could come back and find the reference that Greg's talking about, report back.
Sure.
And on the list, after that, we can figure out if the right next step is, because we don't want to start out with a conflict.
That's
so
fair.
We can deconflict this and then proceed from there.
Right.
But obviously, there's interest in this work.
Okay.
In the work group. So thank you.
So I think I'm the next two, right? Yeah, I'm sorry. How's time?
I think you're right on time now.
Right on time? Okay. Yes, this one is applicability of ACTN to...
I'll give you 4 extra minutes.
4 extra minutes, okay. But I'll give next on behalf of my... Yeah.
Next time.
I think we presented this one, I think Dan King did, in the one of the both about network slicing a while ago. And now I think a lot of things are now a little bit more getting clearer. So I want to present here with some update how ACTN can be applicable to network slicing. Here, what do we mean by network slicing? We're not, redefining network slicing defined by somewhere else, but we are talking about T network slicing from ACTN perspective. So we are talking about T network slice is a collection of resources that is used to establish logically dedicated virtual networks over one or multiple T networks. That's actually our narrow definition of T network slicing. Essentially, network slicing in the context of ACTN provide traffic engineering connectivity that ensures performance guarantee to serve the customer with a variety of service constraints. That could be latency, reliability, capacity, and service function specific capabilities. Okay. We put some requirements here. What are the requirements? Resource slicing definitely is very important requirement, or partitioning, so that it can be given to the customer. And then also network function virtualization, whether it's physically or virtualized, but that the resource can be given to the customer. And also isolation, I think, it's a very important requirement. Whether I want my tunnel or virtual network isolated in a sense that I don't want to be impacted by other virtual networks, for instance. And that can be also, customer can also ask for very strict latency with no variations, for instance. Then those things has to be factored in. And security is another important requirement, because I don't want my VNs revealed to other people. And control and orchestration definitely is a very important requirement because we're not just dealing with one system or one subdomain. So you have to kind of orchestrate across different entity. And here we are talking about TE scope. So we can give service to the client who are asking this TE slices, and then flexibly report them in the feedback loop how their virtual network is doing, which was the previous the presentation. So as I said, virtual network is a very important concept, and then we almost use virtual network as a slice, virtual network slice allocated to the customer to meet isolation requirement, resource reservation guarantee, and reliability, and performance monitoring, programmability and monitoring, and underlay visibility. If they want to see that, we give that reference point so that they can look at operational data if they will. And another thing was SF, VNF, NF-aware connectivity, which is I just presented. Those might be very important, down the road. So what are the building blocks that we have done so far to fulfill T network slicing within ACTN context? We have architecture framework, and we have an ACTN VN Yang model. We have a good basis to create VN and then do CRUD operation of VN. And then a service mapping model that we believe that's very important glue to glue a customer service model to TE underlay, so that customer can so that the service can be using the underlay resources and with the visibility, and requirement like isolation and reliability will be conveyed through those mapping model. And then and the customer would be interested how their network virtual network slice is performing, which is very important criteria, especially 5G ultra low latency with deterministic characteristic. They would be very interested how their services are performing. So performance monitoring is very important aspects. And SF-aware topology model, because it's not just connectivity anymore, because customer may want to do have some dynamic virtual machine mobility tied to it, or some other virtual network function enabled T connectivity as a slice. So those are the four aspects that we believe ACTN has discussed in this working group. So what additional IETF work might be needed? I said IETF work, not just TEAS. Maybe a security issue might be very important, how to assure that. And the policy control of slices is more policy-driven stuff. And also requesting compute storage function resources during VNS setup. Currently, we don't have this, but this can be definitely addressed down the road. That includes VNF type and size, location, and ensuring correct service chains. So next step, this was informational draft, basically put all the ACTN and then SF-enabled topology work, which is TEAS scope, to address that, hey, a lot of network slicing from transport network perspective or T network perspective have been in place, but we are kind of terrible to tell other people outside of TEAS working group and even outside of IETF. This might be a good tutorial type of informational draft that can be very useful so that people can understand better. So that's the purpose of this draft.
Igor Briskin, Huawei. I think it's a very good work. And one comment that I would do is that you mentioned that one piece is missing is kind of automation, like a client-driven automation of the T resources and basically controlling network in a way that basically reacts to different events in the network, right? So I would encourage you to take a look on the work that we are doing in net mode for the generic network automation, which is precisely targeted to do just that.
Okay. Could you send a pointer to the TEAS?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
That did not work. I'll go to the other one.
All set? Thank you. Right. So this draft has existed in a number of incarnations for a while. So the purpose and scope of the draft is to describe the enhancements that we need to make to VPNs to support the requirements of new services. And in particular, we're concerned about the 5G scenario, such as network slicing. So what we're interested in is the design of an enhanced data plane that is needed to support this. The hard and soft isolation at the data plane and the resources immediately above the data plane. Determinism of deterministic operation. So there's a link with deterministic networking. We're interested in the protocols in the underlay and the overlay of the enhanced VPN. So there's an integration between physical, virtual, and service functions that needs to happen. And of course, it needs to be simple to create, delete, and modify with some very interesting on-the-fly modification requirements. And we need monitoring and instrumentation. So here's what we think the service model, what the model basically needs to look like. Level 1 operation is kind of like existing VPNs that we have today. So we have logical separation or differentiation. We have the possibility of interference between services, and this is what we've got. And it is one of the services that we will need to still support on this network. Going up to the next degree of operation, we need forwarding plane isolation. We need dedicated resources to be provided to services so that operations with critical demands can operate without interfering with each other. That is the scope of enhanced VPN. Independent operation at the control plane and even better isolation, that is for further study. That's not the area that we want to address here. So let's look at a sort of spectrum of resource isolation. So traditional VPNs operate with statistical multiplexing with all the resources shared. Absolute isolation is only really achievable through having dedicated networks. What we're looking for is a sort of pragmatic approach in the middle, where we get sufficient isolation for the applications to operate, but without the full need for a completely independent network, which would be too expensive. Now, when I talk about resources, I'm talking about links, bandwidth, buffers in the dedicated buffers in the devices, possibly dedicated resources in the forwarder NPU, dedicated queuing, etc. So modern routers are acquiring the ability to carve out resources for the most important services, and we need a structure to deal with that. Most current VPNs are...
Stuart, do you mind a clarifying question on the previous?
Go ahead.
I did read your document, but it was before this week, so
yes,
things are a little jumbled. Did you cover the case, or are you aware of the case that the current tool set does allow mapping VPNs, even LDP-controlled VPNs, to TE, using RSVPT to give the current level of service described by the current documents? And
some people actually deploy this. Not a lot, but some people actually deploy that. Are you aware of that? And was that covered?
There is some just talk about RSVP in the document, and RSVP is clearly a candidate technology to use. But
Right, but you said this is a gap, and in terms of the definition, not only is it defined, it's deployed. And there's no question you're going beyond what's there today.
So no, we don't cover that. We don't cover that adequately in the document.
So you might want to be aware that actually exists, but not only in the standards, but in the real world. Again, it's not deployed a lot because of the scaling issues.
Exactly. We clearly have to get a handle on how to make this scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. So spectrum performance requirements, largely VPN is best effort. And as Lou was saying, when you try and provide a short bandwidth to VPN, then you end up with some scaling issues. What isn't really dealt with VPNs is guaranteed latency and enhanced delivery. So we're getting some work done in deterministic networking, but it's not really properly integrated yet into a VPN structure. This isn't very good this way that this thing sort of...
Yeah, I actually tried to get to the other way of viewing it, which you get less real estate, but easier paging, but it failed for some reason. Which slide?
Okay, so can I have the next slide, please? It seems to be easier with your... That's it. So here's the architecture. We have an enhanced data plane, which is where our resource partitioning and reservation happens. On top of that, we construct our virtual networks with guaranteed resources, and we will have to have a tighter integration between the overlay and the underlay than we traditionally have with VPNs, because we need specific resources in order to assure performance. And then above that, we have a control plane.
Before you move on, channeling Greg, there's two different questions. The first, which was I think at the start of the slide, was would the physical isolation, e.g. TDM, be strong isolation example?
TDM is a good example of strong isolation, yes.
Okay, great. And then the second question, which was at the end, is do you think that DetNet can be scaled to internet level?
Well, I don't think we're... when you say internet level, or internet with the big I don't think you can do anything at the big I level like this. So I think we're really, and the demand is really for large scale customer networks. So the networks owned by, for example, a mobile service operator. I don't think we have to do the big I.
And I'll comment that the big I is out of scope of DetNet's working group charter right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a whole different ballgame.
Right.
Andy Malice, just for the record, I do want to point out that there is a draft in the DetNet working group for large scaling for large scale use of DetNet. So anyone who's interested should read that draft.
And large scale as defined by Stewart, not the internet.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
you know, we're talking about large, not infinite, and I think I regard the internet as infinite, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Janos Farkas, yes, large scale in that draft means larger scale than TSN, which is the charter of the DetNet. That's what we are working on.
Right. So yes, we're talking about mobile phone sort of areas in my work anyway. Mobile phone areas, not factories and enterprises. When we're not talking about anyone can connect anywhere and get this service. Okay. So some candidate technologies. So for the underlay, there's a bunch of technologies that we can use: flexible Ethernet, TSN, IEEE TSN, time-sensitive networking. We can build an enhanced queuing and QoS model, and we can provide dedicated nodal resources as CPU slices and network processor slices. In the network layer, there's a number of candidate technologies that we need to glue together. Regular MPLS and RSCP-TE. MPLS SR looks quite interesting because SR provides a way of identifying resources without binding everything to the path. Same with SRv6 is getting some attraction, and then all the work we're doing in deterministic networking. But our view is that the segment routing world needs enhancement to be usable, because segment routing isn't really yet talking about resource reservation. In the control plane,
Stuart, just, as you move forward in the document, this is Lou as contributor, by the way. As you move forward in your work,
yes,
try to clean up the separation of control plane and data plane, because some of the things you were listing there were control plane and other things were data plane, and it's good to understand which issue you're trying to address.
Didn't I? Yeah, maybe the document does.
RSVP-TE is in a network layer. It's a control plane.
Right.
TE-LSPs or TP-LSPs are certainly network layer.
Yes, but
I think actually we want to mention the TE-LSP here.
Perfect.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Yeah, that's how you set it up, and there is what resources get bound to it, and then there's whether the resource is bound to the path or to the particular packet. So yes, we do need to clean this up. We do need to clarify this.
There's the sort of bookkeeping, which I always think of as the reservation stage, and then there's the actual setting up of queues, and that's the allocation.
Right, and I've been really thinking, with my sort of lower layer hat on.
Sort of mixing.
Yes, and we will clarify that. So there is control plane work. We certainly need to identify what resources are available and send them up to a centralized controller. There's a bunch of technologies, many of which were discussed here earlier today: L2SM, ACTN, PSET, BGPLS, which are good for having the conversation between the lower layers and the centralized controller. What we're worried about is whether a pure centralized model at these scaling levels is right, and how much we need to move down back into a distributed model just to keep the thing operating in a timely basis. So with start thinking about scalability, right? So if you think about what we've got here, with distributed and centralized control on the left, and the state in the network versus the state in the packet on the right. RSVP-TE, the state is kind of in the network with just a label on the packet. And it uses distributed control, whereas MPLS-TP, just as an example of just simple MPLS with a completely centralized control plane, the state again is fully in the network, and you have to go and touch, in that case, all of the nodes in the network to set your path up. SR took an opposite approach, which is to move all of the state into the packet. Well, they don't quite do that actually, because they have binding SIDs which kind of break that model and move it closer to the hybrid approach here. So, given the large number of sessions that we need to maintain, given constraints on label stack size and the fact that SR has no resource management in it yet, we suspect we're going to end up in a hybrid approach closer to the center of this spectrum of resource and control. Oops. So, what other work is? It's not very good, is it? What other work is going on? So we've got a draft in Spring, or that we're trying to get adopted into Spring, which describes the segment routing aspects of this work. We've got another draft in LSR describing some of the enhancements that we think need to happen to the link state protocols to collect and manage the information and do some of the calculations. There's the work going on in DECnet, which we see as one of the main underpins for this work, both the architecture and in particular the MPLS solution document we see as very applicable. And the ACTN work happening here, and there's also an ACN piece of work that was taken to RTGWG. So that's all IETF work that's related to this, and we see this as supporting the framework that we're putting together. Yari wrote a draft on virtualization in the work the IETF was doing. This is a study of virtualization techniques. We should treat that and make sure that we're not missing any tricks, but I don't see that as being in the same space. And draft Elise Spring network slicing building blocks is just that. It's a collection of building blocks that may be used to underpin this sort of network slicing technology. It provides a catalog. What we think we need to do with VPN Plus, though, is to enhance SR by adding the resource isolation and determinism, and that is not currently well supported in SR. So next steps, we've presented this before several times, mainly in RTGWG. The consensus seems to be that it belongs here, and we'd like to work with the authors to initiate a working group adoption process at some suitable point. Okay. And that's it.
Daniele Ceccarelli, 2 questions. The first one is regarding scalability. I mean, I guess a service operator would have in his catalog VPNs and VPN Plus, right?
Mm-hmm.
What's the percentage in the sense that it's not going to be 100% VPN Plus?
No.
First reason being it's going to be much more expensive.
So there's 2 dimensions of scalability. There's many dimensions, I suppose, to scalability. There's the number of services, and sure, it's not going to be. I don't think it'll be one application, one service, as some people in 3GPP are suggesting. But considering the sort of resource binding you're going to have to do, it's going to be, look like a lot more from the resource point of view than classic VPNs, where basically a classic VPN, you've got like 8 classes of service and that's it.
Correct.
So
that's why I'm saying
yes.
I would expect, I don't know, 10% of the VPNs to be VPN Plus, 20%. So is still there's still a huge scalability issue, right, since we are going to address just a small percentage of them.
Yeah. With virtual mobile operators, you're sharing the same infrastructure. That you only need 1 client per virtual operator to get into numbers that are non-trivial compared to where we are now. But I don't think we're talking of millions, and I think we're talking of more than 10.
Okay. And second question is, so you did a very good introduction, saying it's something more than a classical VPN. Is it something less than a VPN with a totally dedicated network?
Danielle, we're over time and there's 2 more people in queue. Is it okay if you take this to the list? Oh, thanks.
You like stealing my time today.
We appreciate that you gave extra time here, so thank you.
Mr. Farrell.
Adrian Farrell. The document's found the right home, in my opinion, and is going the right way, and thank you for an architecture that gives us context for everything. I think we need to move some of this more towards a framework of pointing to other things and identifying gaps in work. And you've sort of got that on the slide, so I'm happy to talk.
Yes, please do. We're willing to work with anyone who's going to help us.
Dan Bogdanovich, +1 on previous comment as well. And I have some consideration about the underlying hardware capabilities that we have taken into the account, and that will be some of my concerns in order how to solve some of the issues.
Thank you.
Take that to the list.
Take it to the list. We'd be delighted to work with you.
I'm not going to ask question 2. This is only 1 question. How many people are interested in hearing this topic more in the future? Let's continue to talk about it. That's a really good endorsement. That's a great number. So thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we're over time and done. Made it through our agenda. Thank you all for a very good meeting. And we'll see you in Bangkok.
No, no. Well, so that's yeah.